Hello there, fellow time travelers. It's me. Number 10, The Crown Beneath Copenhagen. It's a chilly day in Denmark, so let's talk about treasure. This story takes us back to 1864 when an old stone tower collapsed. That might not sound like an exciting adventure, but it was for the brothers named Henrik and Peter Winter Nielsen. You see, the tower was part of a castle that had long ago fallen into disrepair. The castle was called Kronborg Castle, and it stood guard over the entrance to Copenhagen's old town. At one point, it must have been an imposing structure, but by the time the tower fell in 1864, it was just an old ruin. Henrik and Peter saw the collapse coming. They had watched as centuries of erosion took their toll on the ancient masonry, and they knew the tower wouldn't stand for much longer. So before the authorities showed up, they went to the site and began digging in the mud. The brothers were prospectors, and they knew that the crumbling tower would make a great place to find treasure. Castles are often built on top of earlier ruins, and Kronborg was no exception. When it was constructed in the 1200s, it replaced an older Viking fortress. During the years that followed, the castle had changed hands so many times that it now belonged to the Crown of Denmark. And all those people who had lived within its thick walls over the centuries had left behind treasures and valuables that could still be lying around waiting to be found. What Henrik and Peter didn't expect was to find anything valuable. They were simply hoping to salvage some bricks from the rubble so they could sell them. But as they dug beneath the tower, they hit something hard with their shovels. At first, they thought they'd struck a buried foundation or maybe a very large rock. But then Henrik brushed away the dirt with his hand and saw that what he was looking at was actually metal. He and his brother stared at the metal in disbelief as they realized it was a chest. They struggled to lift the heavy iron-bound wooden box out of the ground. It was so big that Peter had to go get his horse to help him pull it out. Then, after what felt like hours, they finally got to the surface and pried it open. Inside was exactly what they had hoped for, stacks of gold and silver coins. According to reports, the chest contained 11 pounds of silver and nearly 2 pounds of gold. After selling the treasure, Henrik and Peter split the profits and shared their newfound wealth with their family. That should have been the end of the story, except for one small detail. The men had never asked permission to dig beneath the crumbling tower. They had simply shown up and started excavating the area. In Denmark, this is considered stealing, and they were charged with the crime. The brothers argued that since nobody owned the castle, they were well within their rights to remove whatever treasure they could find. But the Danish government disagreed and confiscated the coins. The state bought the wreck of Kronborg Castle and opened it to the public as an archaeological site. All that remained of the original building was a single tower, which stands to this day. Over the years, more and more of the castle has been uncovered and put on display. But where the brothers found the chest is now underneath the gift shop. Number 9, The Crown of Scotland. In 1831, Queen Victoria came to power in Britain, kicking off a period known as the Victorian Age. Queen Victoria ruled over Britain and Ireland for 63 years, making her the second longest reigning monarch in British history. She also became the Empress of India after the British colonized the country and made it a part of their empire. The Queen was a stickler for tradition, and nowhere was this more evident than in the coronation ceremony. On June 28, 1838, Queen Victoria was crowned in a lavish ceremony at Westminster Abbey. As the new monarch made her way through the abbey, she wore a robe of red velvet trimmed with gold and a crown upon her head. The crown was made of gold and decorated with precious stones, including rubies, sapphires, garnets, and topazes. Each jewel was carefully selected to represent the different parts of the British Empire. Scottish historian James Balfour claimed that the crown was meant to symbolize how the British monarchies of England and Scotland had finally come together under one ruler. At the time, Queen Victoria was only 18 years old, and she looked stunning in the ornate crown jewels. Unfortunately for her, the crown wouldn't stay in her family for very long. In 1902, her son, Edward VII, became king and decided to switch things up. He wanted a new crown for himself, one that was simpler and less flashy. And so the old crown was put into storage, gathering dust alongside other pieces of royal regalia until 1953. That year, Queen Elizabeth II was crowned in a ceremony very similar to her mother's. As the new queen made her way to her throne, she wore the crown that had been crafted for her great-grandmother. Elizabeth was fond of the crown and wore it during every major royal engagement until 2015, when she began to suffer from arthritis. At age 90, the queen had become too old and frail to wear the heavy jewels on her head, and she switched to a lighter crown that didn't weigh her down. But the original crown was brought out for special occasions, like when Prince Charles was crowned king in May 2023. Now the crown sits in the Tower of London, where it can be admired by anyone who wants to take a peek. Number 8. The Crown Jewels of the United Kingdom. Speaking of crowns, let's talk about some of the most valuable jewels in the world, the crown jewels of the United Kingdom. These priceless artifacts date back hundreds of years and are worn by the British monarch on special occasions like coronations. There are over 240 pieces in the collection, each one more dazzling than the last. Some of the oldest pieces include the sovereign's ring, which dates back to the 1600s, and the sovereign's scepter with cross, which was made in 1661 for King Charles II. But the crown jewels aren't just pretty baubles. They're also symbols of power and authority. For centuries, they've been used to signify the transfer of power from one monarch to the next. During the coronation ceremony, the new king or queen is presented with the jewels and places them on their head and body. This is a way of showing that they are now the rightful heir to the throne and have the authority to rule over the kingdom. The crown jewels have been stolen in the past, but today they are kept safe in the Tower of London, where visitors can come to marvel at their beauty. The collection is so valuable that it would take almost $3 billion to buy them all. But don't worry, you don't need that kind of money to appreciate their beauty. If you visit the Tower of London, you can see the crown jewels for yourself. Just be prepared to wait in line. Number 7. The Lost Crown of Norway. In the olden times, the kings of Norway wore fancy hats made of gold and precious gems. One of the most important of these was the Crown of the Kings of Norway, which was worn by every king from the 14th century until the 1800s. But where is it now? Well, that's a bit of a tricky question because the crown was lost in the early 1300s, along with the rest of the royal regalia. Back then, Norway was being ruled by King Haakon V, a man who liked to live large. He kept his crown jewels in a vault beneath the floor of a church in Bergen, Norway. But one day, while he was gone, a fire broke out in the church and everything inside was destroyed. The crown was never recovered. Some say it's buried in the ashes of the old church, while others believe it was stolen in the chaos that followed the fire. Either way, it's gone for good. This is a real shame because the crown was a symbol of Norway's national identity and heritage. For centuries, it represented the country's independence and sovereignty. But now all we have are old paintings and written descriptions. There have been attempts to recreate the crown, but none of them have been successful. The original was too unique and one of a kind. To this day, nobody knows exactly what happened to it. Did it burn up along with the rest of the church, or is it sitting in some dusty old museum that nobody knows about? Who knows, maybe one day it will turn up again, just like the crown of Denmark found by those two brothers in 1864. Thanks for watching. Remember to hit that thumbs up button before you go. See you later, bye.